Okay, testing. All right, thanks everyone for hanging around. We're going to have the apologetics human AI and the human soul session now. So if you want to join in, grab a seat down near the front. We'll start very shortly. Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming along today for our session on artificial intelligence and the human soul. So if you're still coming in, grab a seat down near the front. We're going to have some group discussions today as well. So grab a seat near people and we'll get started. Okay, so my guess is you may have heard of artificial intelligence recently in the news. There's something new out there called ChatGPT, which is a very impressive artificial intelligence program. And I've used it a bit myself and played around with it. And to be honest, it gets me asking some questions about, if this thing seems to be really intelligent, way more intelligent than we might be, then what makes us human? And that's something that I think we can have a look at. But I'm also going to go through some of the technical details, so you've got some understanding of what AI is and what it isn't. Because there's a lot of hype in the news, and there's a lot of people reporting on it who don't know their stuff. They're just saying any old thing. So I think that's going to be useful. But to start with, I want you to have an idea of where artificial intelligence is today. And we're going to play a little game. So it's going to be, can you tell the difference? And I'm going to read some statements that one of them is from a human, one of them was ChatGPT generated. Okay, so first statement, we'll start easy and then we'll get a bit harder. First statement. Yes. Yes, GPT, I should have remembered this. So GPT-3 is an artificial intelligence model that they've trained, and ChatGPT it's based on it. But GPT is the technical language. It's the program itself, yeah. Generative Programming Transformer. I think I got the P wrong, but it's a technical, yeah, it's actually quite technical, the terminology. That's right. Yeah. So, but yeah, the chat is like an interface over the top of a giant model that's trained on the internet effectively. So yeah, I'll come back with the definition later because I should know that. Yep. Generative Pre-trained transformer, that's it, yeah. Transformer's the key thing if you're into the AI technology. that's been the major breakthrough which made this possible. So there's something called a transformer. But anyway, so this is, and yet please ask questions, chuck your hand up throughout the talk, because it's actually going to be plenty of discussion time as well, so really good. Okay, I want you to work out whether this was ChatGPT generated or whether that was a person who said that. Unlock your potential by embracing uncertainty. It's where true growth and transformation lie. So have a think about that. And the other one, so one of these is ChatGPT and one of these is human. Believe in yourself and all that you are. Know that there is something inside you that is greater than any obstacle. So have a think. Which one of these was said by a person, and which one of these, if you Google it, you won't find it because it was done by ChatGPT. Hands up if you think the first one was ChatGPT. Most people, or maybe 50-50. Correct. The first one was ChatGPT, and I said, create an inspirational one-liner that no one has said before, and it gave me that. So it was pretty good. I mean, they're both, I wouldn't give you this advice. It's very pop psychology, but maybe it's useful. But so that's a little start, but we're going to get a bit more challenging. I'm going to read to you two paragraphs, two statements, or descriptions, I should say. One of these was generated by ChatGPT, and one of them was a human. And the statement is going to be from the perspective of a surfer who has been inside the barrel of a wave, and they're describing that experience and the emotion. And ChatGPT is also going to describe it as if it is the surfer. So it's going to pretend that it's been in a barrel as well. Okay, first one. This is the first bit, and I'll read it out. Getting tubed is that ephemeral moment when one gets engulfed in the water. The feeling that the giant of a wave can wipe you out with one wrong move gives an adrenaline rush that adventurous people yearn for. The view, if only cameras could capture the entire beauty of the barrel, a blend of blues, greens, and the sandy browns moving all at once, yet seemingly not at all. The silence is the virtue of the barrel, yet the auditory experience of the water is an encounter that is rightly termed paradisiacal. The longing for this transcendence to never end, but concurrently being mesmerised by the light at the end of the barrel is an incomparable feeling. That's the first one. Second one. Riding the barrel is one of the most exhilarating experiences a surfer can have. It's the ultimate feeling of being in the zone where everything else disappears and it's just you, the wave, and the moment. For me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of dropping into a wave and seeing that perfect barrel shape forming in front of me. The anticipation of what's to come is almost as thrilling as the ride itself. And when you finally make it into the barrel, it's like nothing else exists. It's just you, the wave, and the energy that connects you to the ocean. Okay, one of these is ChatGPT, one of them isn't. I want you to put your hand up if you think the first one, the ephemeral moment one, is ChatGPT. Well, you're all wrong. The second one is ChatGPT, and I thought that sounded nicer than the first one. So I asked ChatGPT, write a feel-good article about riding the barrel for a surfing magazine as if it was written by Rob Machado. And he's this famous, like, soulful, stylish surfer from San Francisco. So what was crazy as well is ChatGPT gave me not just one paragraph. That was the first one. It gave me 4 paragraphs in a couple of seconds. And it had flow, structure, it was really nicely written and made me want to go surfing. It was really impressive. And I think this is why artificial intelligence is a little concerning at the moment, because it sounds so much like a human. And we think, oh, it feels like it's a human talking to you sometimes, which can be quite confusing. So something, I think, yep. I reckon, I got no idea what paradisiacal means. Crazy word. But I think he went a bit over the top for his business. So yeah, he's a surfing coach from I just found it online. But so that's the thing, it sounds, there's actually, you might be aware of what's called the Turing test. There's a guy called Alan Turing in World War II, I believe, And he was brilliant, and he made this computer program. It was called the Enigma machine, and that was to solve the codes of the Germans, so he could actually understand them, and then they could use their, I think it was radio, to interfere the German codes and work out where they were going. But what was also interesting in his research, he looked into the future and essentially thought, this is going to be a problem when machines get intelligent, or intelligent to a degree. And he called this the Turing test, is where if a person is in a conversation with an artificial intelligence, without seeing that it's just a computer chip, will it be able to tell whether it's talking to a person or not? And if you pass the Turing test as the artificial intelligence, you can fool the person that it's a person you're talking to. And I think we're getting pretty close to that. And people thought, like in my research group at uni, that, it's going to be ages before we get to that stage. And then ChatGPT came out, and we're all a bit worried. So anyway, it's moving quickly, but there's also some issues with it too. And we're going to look at this today. So I'm going to give you an overview of what AI is, what it isn't, and I think that's really important. I want you to be educated as to what AI can't do, and where it breaks down, and where there's errors, and where it's not reliable, which I think is important to know. And I guess a bit about my background. So I'm a research student at the University of Queensland. My research is in artificial intelligence being applied to coastal engineering, so things at the beach. And we use it to look at tracking breaking waves and things like that. But I'm involved with a research group who do a bit more of the research that's related to ChatGPT-like technologies. So I've got some idea. I'm not an expert, but I should be able to give you some insights at least, so you can think about it critically. We're then going to go on to part 2, where Royce is going to come up and share about how the human soul is different to AI. And I think that's going to be really interesting. So we're going to lead to that. But I want you to understand what AI is before we get into that. There's going to be plenty of small group discussions. So where you're sitting, 4 or 5 people around you, we'll have a little chat and talk about some ideas. And there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So let's get into it. I'm going to pray, and then we'll start. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for today, for church this morning, and this opportunity to think critically about this new technology in our world. Pray that you'll give us wisdom and, that you'll help us, not to overreact to these things, but to calmly approach these things and think about them critically. Pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so before we get into the content, apologetics is a strange word. It sounds like we're apologising for something, but I just want to read this passage just so you've got an idea of what these sessions are sort of about. But in your hearts revere Christ, so that's Jesus, as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. And I guess one of the purposes of this session is, as Christians, we might have people ask us philosophical questions and challenge our faith and say, you're just dancing to your DNA. There's nothing, no God, anything like that. We're not supposed to go and, have a go at them for saying that, but we give them a reasonable defense. We show them the logic and the reasoning why we believe what we do. Here's the evidence. So that's what we want to do. And I think there's some philosophical questions that are going to be raised today, and we can be giving our logical reasoning for what we believe today as well. But importantly, this is the big thing I want to say for discussions today. We're probably going to have some differences of opinion, so we discuss with gentleness and respect, and that's really important. So keep that in mind, and I think we'll all learn together a lot of things today if we approach it that way. Cool. So, what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence, now I'm going to give you, this is sort of how my lecturers at uni teach things. They give you a definition. It's not going to make a lot of sense, but then I'll give you an example, and that'll help. AI generally refers to computer models that are trained on labelled data such to allow accurate labelling of unlabelled data. So it sounds a bit technical, so I'm going to give you an example. But I want you to understand, I guess one of the biggest takeaways today is data and how important that is in AI. This is our AI model. So it's our black box, grey box. And essentially, we're going to put things in, we're going to get things out. Inside the model are lots of numbers. So ChatGPT is a model like this, and it has, I think, 178 billion parameters. So they've got massive computer servers that store this. 178 billion numbers is what those parameters represent, and there's a certain way that you order them to produce a calculation to get a result at the end, which is your response. So in the AI model, I like to work with computer vision, so looking at images. That's my research, and it's probably the easiest way to teach AI as well. Imagine you've got this image of a dog, okay? You can represent that dog image by pixels. So you can number them from the top left corner, all the way across, all the way down to the bottom. Every pixel has a value. You know, what color is it? So you'd have 3 different colors, red, green, and blue, and you'd mix them together. And then, so all those colors, so you have, let's say it's 100 by 100 pixels. So whatever 100 times 100 is, I think it's 10,000. And then you multiply it by 3, because you've got 3 colors per pixel. So you've got 30,000 numbers. You put all those numbers in a big list, put them into the model. The model has all these parameters or numbers that do calculations on that. So calculate through, and then you get a number at the end between 0 and 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to say we want that number to be 1 if the image represents a dog. We want that number to be a 0 if it represents not a dog, so any other image. Okay, so what's going to happen is we put this image through the first time, and the model just has random weights, random numbers, I should say. And these numbers, literally, you just randomize them. Random numbers. So when the pixels go in, numbers crunched, you get a number between 0 and 1. Let's call it 0.5. And that means the model's in between. It's on the fence. It's going, I've got no idea whether it's a dog or not a dog. I'm going to say 50%. What you do is you take the difference between 1, the actual value, the truth, and the prediction, 0.5. You take that difference and you feed that back into the model, back into the grey box, and it actually uses calculus to go back and change all the parameters based on that difference. And what that does is it updates the model. It's what we call training. So the model is trained. We go back and we put the image in again, all through the calculations, and now we get a number like 0.8, and it's closer because the numbers actually changed. And we do this again and again and again, taking how far away we were from the truth, putting that back into the model to update the parameters, and do it again and again. So we do that not just for one image, but we do that for other images with correct labels. So that's our image of not a dog. We push it through the model. We know the actual label is a 0 because it's not a dog. The value that the model might give is maybe 0.3. So then what we do is we take the difference between 0 and 0.3, so minus 0.3, put that through the model, the parameters change, and it updates. And you're going to do this for not just 2 images with 2 labels, you do this for thousands or for Google, they got a big advantage because they have all of Google images. They've got the whole internet of images, all with labels. So you can imagine they can train some pretty amazing artificial intelligence models from that. So that's where the beauty of this artificial intelligence stuff is in the data. So that's what happens, and you've got your model, and it's getting better and better and better, and you'll train this thousands of times over with thousands of images. And then eventually, what you do is you put it into the real world, and you get a new image that the model's never seen before. So this image of the dog, let's imagine the model has never crunched those numbers before, of all those pixels. It goes into the model, and then the model gives you a probability, a number between 0 and 1. So let's say it's 0.8, and that means the model's 80% sure that that image is a dog. And we go, fantastic, the model's working pretty well. So that's AI in a nutshell. You're using data to train the model to find out what it should be, how far away was it from the actual answer, take the difference, feed that back in, and update the model again and again and again. And then you do that with huge computers. So massive, the AI model box is really big, the data sets are really big, and you've got impressive computers that can train it really fast, do thousands of iterations, and then you get very impressive models. So that's AI in a nutshell. Inside the grey box, a little bit more technical, and then we'll go into the less technical stuff very soon. Neural networks are what have provided the breakthrough in artificial intelligence, and they're actually based on how we understand the brain in a very simple way. So we've got neurons in our brains and neural pathways. And remember I talked about all those billion parameters, those numbers in the model. The way that we actually structure it is as if neurons are like the inputs, and the neural pathways is what we call the parameters. And they're the numbers that you multiply things by. So that's just a bit of the maths, but you can ask me about that later. I've got mathematics slides that I can show if you're interested, but I'm not going to go through mathematics today for this session. So it is based on how the brain works. It's got nothing on the brain's complexity. We still don't understand all the intricacies of the brain, not even close. So you don't have to worry about it being more advanced than our brain. It's simpler, it's more brute force than our brain, but you can put, thousands of computer servers behind it and get it to do a lot of data crunching. So keep this in mind when you're watching the news. It's not magic. It's not like it's good or evil. It's just mathematics, computers, and data, and a lot of it. It scales. Lots of computers, lots of data. Okay, we're going to have a discussion soon, and I want you to discuss things about training data. So I'm going to give you a bit of an insight, and then we'll discuss it. And this, if there's one thing I want you to take away from the presentation, it's the understanding of how data works in these systems. I think this is really important. And this is where it actually crosses into a bit of, maybe not philosophy, but concerns about how this is used. Okay, the success of an AI model all depends on the size and quality of the data set. A good AI model is the result of heaps of accurately and consistently labelled training data. So, like I said, Google's got a big head start. They've got a huge database that we've been doing all the labelling for them, because what we do is we upload an image and we say, oh, it's this, on our website. And Google scrapes that from your website and puts it on Google Images so people can access it, which is good. So they've got all these images and they're all labelled, and we've got access to it as well. So they can make very good AI models. And it's the same with search engines, recommendation systems, and ChatGPT. But there's a problem here. How you label or categorise data may not be true, but as long as it's consistent, the AI model will learn your way of labelling the data. So, your way of labelling the data may be wrong, but if you're consistent, the AI model will get very good at labelling data or predicting things from inputs the way you label it. So you might be, let's just say the dog and cat, or the dog and not dog images. Maybe the convention in the world is that the right way to label them is to have a 1 for a dog and a 0 for not a dog. But you might disagree and think that's wrong. So what you're going to do is you're going to train the model, but you're going to label all the images the wrong way around. You're going to label all the dogs with a 0 and all the not dogs with a 1. And the world's going, no, you're doing the wrong thing. You're going to misinformation, all that. You go, no, I'm going to do it anyway. And you train your model, and the model's still going to work just as well because it's consistent. Doesn't mean it's true. So the model doesn't really have truth or anything like that in it. It's the way you label your data and how we interpret that. So in that case, the labeling of the data was wrong, and the model's giving what we would consider the wrong output, but the model's doing a really good job of it, doing it consistently. So something to consider. Let's take that forward and think about that idea with ChatGPT. And this is really important. We've got ChatGPT, so it's a model, and it's a bit more complex. It's actually, there's a neural network, and then there's another neural network which is trained to update that neural network the way humans would like it to be updated, and then it reinforces itself. It's very powerful. But anyway, think of it as a black box, or a grey box. You put questions or statements in. Those words and phrases you can represent as numbers. So there's a special way to encode that. Numbers go in, numbers go out. Again, the outputs are just going to be numbers that represent words and sentences and phrases. So that's ChatGPT. Think about the data. The majority of the training data set are responses to questions on the internet. And what does that mean? Well, from what I've researched, it sounds like a lot of what ChatGPT was trained on was things like Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow is like an online Q&A forum for coders. So a lot of ChatGPT is actually trained on computer programming and how it's written. And what's actually interesting about that is it's quite objective. There's not a lot of subjectivity to code. It works or it doesn't. And I think that's part of what's made ChatGPT very powerful, because it's actually been trained on questions and answers that have underlying, that are they're black and white. They work or they don't. So there's functionality and logic behind it. But it's also things like Reddit. So I don't know if you've been on Reddit before and asked a question, and if you see the top, the best response has all these votes, and everyone votes for the best response on Reddit, and that's the one you'll see first. Do you think that response is always true? The best response on Reddit? It's the one that's the most popular, but it may not be true. And when ChatGPT is trained on the internet's worth of this data, it will find the consistencies on what's most common, what's on the average. And generally, because it's mostly trained on code, the code that's mostly voted up is code that works. So ChatGPT is ridiculous. If you've ever done coding, you can ask ChatGPT to write code for you, and it does a really good job. And it works really well too, most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't work. But if you ask it more subjective questions, like a Reddit sort of question, it'll probably give you what, put it this way, humanity on the internet, on the average, would reply to that question. Okay, so that's something important to consider, and we're going to discuss that now. So, the internet is a large database, but is it always accurate on the average? Discussion time. I want you in little groups to discuss this. Do you think all the data that ChatGPT is trained on, the internet, and I think it's mostly coding data on the internet, but I think it's Reddit as well. They're a commercial entity now, so they're pretty quiet about how they trained it. But do you think it's truthful? Do you think that matters? So in groups of 4 or 5, discuss this, and then I might hear from a few groups too. Okay, great to see all these discussions. I think we're going to bring it in now. Does anyone from a discussion group want to share very briefly some thoughts that were discussed, some interesting things? Anyone willing? You can chuck your hand up, I'll come around with the microphone. What is truth? Yes, that's it, yeah. That's right, that's a good, and it's... Yep. Yes. Mm. That's right, that's a really good point. Yeah, yep. Okay, so yeah, I'll come around the microphone. Yeah, so the questions were like around what is truth and how important that is, and is the AI model just because it's based on what's popular opinion doesn't mean it's truth.
I was just going to say that question, and in fact, whether you're talking AI or Google in general, that really applies to a much broader context than just ChatGPT or AI, because there'd be a lot of people that would put those kinds of questions into Google, and I've seen it with my teenage son. You know, he just goes with whatever the first result is that comes up, doesn't even usually leave the Google platform to look at a website. You know how they've now got all those questions that they put in there with the quick answers. So, you know, this question of truth and the internet is broader than just AI or ChatGPT. It's a big issue in general.
That's a really good point, and I'm going to bring up Google later because you're right. We've actually been using AI for a long time. You probably don't realise it, but it uses AI to do recommendation systems for what you want to search and things like that as well. Any other? Yep, I'll come around in a sec.
I think all relationships are based on trust, and society therefore is based on trust, and trust is based on truth. If we have no truth, what can we trust? And so where's that leading us as a society?
Yeah, very good point. And that's one of the concerns, I think. How much are people going to trust ChatGPT and the internet, things like that? Any other? Yeah, of course.
Having worked in the computer industry for many years, that is a machine that's based on algorithms. And those algorithms, to use your terminology, are a series of gates. So those gates allow certain numbers through and stop certain numbers. The trick comes in who determines that the gate opens or shuts. Who sets the algorithm? You know, you've heard this expression about my truth and the truth. So blindly accepting anything from a machine, it's a good guide, but you still have to use your human intelligence to decide. Because behind that, you could have an extreme left-wing organization or an extreme right-wing organization. You could determine what Twitter or Google are. They will set the algorithms to close the gates on certain opinions and certain data. And that's where the danger comes in, because it's then presented to you as the truth, and it's anything but. So it's still a machine. Behind the machine is a human brain. The human brain sets the parameters for the decision making.
Yeah. Very good. And I might actually pick up on that point to continue, because a bit more about ChatGPT. One of the breakthroughs with ChatGPT is it used two neural networks. One that was trained on just the responses, and then it uses what's called reinforcement learning, where, because I mean, a lot of my time that I spend in my research is training a model and going, oh, the data's not good, it's not giving me the images I want, so I'm going to go label some more images, and I need these types of images, and I'll put it back in the model, test it again. Did it work? Oh, I'll do that again. And then, in true fashion, software engineers are lazy and they go, oh, I don't want to do this process, I'll get something to automate it. I know, I'll make an AI model to do my labeling of the data and retraining, but I'll have some feedback, and it's called human reinforcement learning, I think, human input reinforcement learning. And ChatGPT uses this really well, and what they do is they get the model to give like 4 different responses, and what they do is they get humans to label those responses and rank them and say that's the best, that's the second best, that's the worst, you know, and this one's in the middle. And it might be due to political things, you know, so they have a list of saying, was it politically incorrect? Was it, you know, was it hateful? Was it all this stuff? Which I think in general is a good thing, because I don't want ChatGPT being a troll like most of the internet is. So they're labeling it, but what they're doing is they're ranking it according to their worldview on what they think is a good answer or not. And that's actually fed into the system. The AI, the second AI, learns how people do their ranking, and then it accelerates it by itself and reinforces the whole system. So it's sort of bootstraps is the terminology we call it. It bootstraps that learning process or the labeling process of people and bootstraps their worldview to the machine learning model itself. So it's very impressive, but yeah, it's not completely controlled. It's a lot of information that we can't fully comprehend, and we sort of have to trust it to some extent. Okay, so we're going to move on to the second part now of the technical part, and then we'll get to Royce very shortly. How is AI being used around us? And we're going to start to move towards some of the philosophical sort of questions. But first, we'll look at this. You may not realise this, but you've been using AI for like years already, especially just using Google. In computer vision applications, and this is where I do my research, facial recognition. You might have walked through the airport, AI was being used. You might have driven up to Indooroopilly Shopping Centre, number plate detection, artificial intelligence. That was one of my first assignments in a computer vision course that I did. We did number plate detection using AI. People tracking. And some countries do that more than others. And translators. So it was really cool at the skate park the other day. Troy was down there and he met this other guy who couldn't actually speak English, but they had this fantastic conversation with each other using Google Translate. And they were laughing and having a great time, and it was really cool. Great use of AI. Phone autocomplete. You may not be so keen on this one when it gets your autocomplete wrong, but usually it's pretty helpful. ChatGPT. These are natural language processing artificial intelligence users. And then we have Google, YouTube, Facebook, Netflix. These are recommendation systems. There was actually a Netflix video about AI and some of the problems of it, looking at recommendation systems, and it was a really good documentary. And essentially, it sort of reinforces things you want to know and want to hear, and it can polarize opinions because of that. But essentially, the way it would work, Netflix gives you a video, you watch the video, and let's say you watch the video all the way to the end. What you've effectively done is given Netflix data to say you liked that video because you watched the whole thing. So what it does is it labels that video input with your label of, I liked the video, and then it puts that into its algorithm, retrains it, and it starts, the algorithm itself is trained on what you like and what you dislike. So it knows to give you more videos that you like and less that you don't like. So that's actually really helpful, like its recommendation systems, but there are problems with it too. Is it good or bad? And I hope from the technical part I talked about before that you realise it's mathematics, computers and data. None of those things are good or bad. They're just technical things. They're numbers. But you can use AI for good or for bad. So John C. Lennox wrote a book about AI called 2084. And it's a bit futuristic, but I think it's actually a good book. And some of his, what he's talked about has probably come true now with ChatGPT. But he mentioned some good uses, and there's this Christian lady from MIT called Professor Rosalind Pickard, and she leads a research team that helps detect early signs of seizures in children using artificial intelligence. So if you're all like, oh, I hate artificial intelligence, we should get rid of it, you'd be getting rid of that. I mean, that's pretty cool. I want that to hang around. That's really useful. This one, I mean, this is controversial, but faster access to information with explanations. If it's good information, that's fantastic. Like Google's helped us a lot to get information quicker. ChatGPT is just going to accelerate this even more. That's good. I've got a bit of bias here. This is my research. Determining safety of river entrances for boat usage. So we're looking at how dangerous the river entrance is, whether boats want to travel out or not. So safety. I mean, I wouldn't be doing the research unless I thought it was good. So there's some good uses. There's plenty more. There's bad uses as well. Political manipulation in elections. So you might have heard of Cambridge Analytica in the news a while ago, and it was to do with US elections. So that whole recommendation system thing, I'm pretty sure that was weaved into marketing and political advertising to polarize people towards, well, not it's got a bad connotation to it, but from a technical perspective to work out what people liked and give them the right information that would lead them to a particular vote. So that's kind of not in the spirit of democracy. Automated weapons. My lecturer and my co-supervisor who's in machine learning, he's got a big thing against this, and I understand why. Weapons can be used to defend people. That's kind of good, but in general, it's not nice to blow each other up. Just imagine this, and the technology for this, like, my colleagues could probably code this in a day. Imagine you've got a drone that's flying over with a camera on it, and it detects a person, and it looks at their skin colour and their facial features, and goes, they're from that nation, so I'm going to shoot them down automatically. But they may not have the same views or represent the same political ideologies as other people who look like them, yet the drones just shot them down. So that's kind of not nice. Exam and assignment cheating. My guess is some of you are here today because you're concerned about this in schools. And it's not easy to... there are some companies at the moment who are claiming that run your responses from your students through our algorithm and we'll detect if it's ChatGPT or not. That's a fraud. Don't buy that. But technically, you can't do that. And the founder of this actually said that too. You're not going to be able to do that. You're just going to have to adapt new ways of education to actually, do more in-person stuff. It is kind of possible to detect cheating if ChatGPT does an encoding of their responses and you use that decoder on the other end. But the next competitor will pop up, make a new ChatGPT without that encoder. So really, it's going to have to change the way things are assessed. And this is one I got a bit of a pet peeve, sports betting companies. In my research group, there's a lot of sports betting companies out there trying to poach machine learning researchers because they know they can make huge amounts of money out of it because it's really good at handling huge amounts of data and putting really good predictions on things where they can make money out of it. And it sort of takes advantage of often vulnerable people. So there's some bad uses of AI. Discussion time. Do you think a very large AI, artificial intelligence like ChatGPT, has a soul? So you might think this is a yes or no answer, and you can give that answer if you want, but I want you to think deeper. I want you to think, what is a soul? Like when I say yes or no, what do I mean by that? How is the biological makeup of my brain and the decisions I make in my brain different to the silicon chip makeup of an artificial intelligence? Is there more than that, that makes it a soul? Think about these deeply. So I want you to discuss that, and after that, we'll have Royce come up and we'll look into this further. So in groups again, I want you to discuss this point. Okay, just one more minute to wrap up your discussion. Okay, I think we're ready to go. So, does anyone want to share what they thought in their group? What was mentioned? Does ChatGPT have a soul? Here we go.
So the answer that we came to was a flat no, but just as someone creates something. So just as God creates his universe and the things in it and imparts things into it, so as human beings, we impart things to the things that we create. So someone behind it, or the people behind it, or the aggregate of all the people involved is some sort of reflection of those people in that creation.
Yeah, very good point. Yep.
What Troy was saying there is that whilst we acknowledge that people have put data into a program like this and the people behind it do have a soul, it's the program doesn't own a soul. It's not making, what did you say, Harry? A moralistic decision. It's not actually basing on a moral. It's basing on data that it's been put into.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's and that's one of the problems, is because it's based on people who do have a moral compass. It's so easy for it to sort of fake it and be like, and it's hard to distinguish between it. Yeah. That's right. You'd hope they would, yeah. That's right. So that was the comment. It's who actually makes those decisions, and do they have a moral compass? So yeah, really good point. Which in general is the average of the internet, which is that a good compass? Cool, okay, we'll continue. And I'm going to invite Royce up to lead the next part of this talk. So thank you, Royce.
Thanks, Michael. I'm not sure that what I'm going to say is going to carry on very well, but I think artificial intelligence is misnamed, and I think it's done partly for political reasons to get funding for it. And it's extraordinarily powerful in the sense that it uses data sets of an amazing size, and it computes at amazing speed. I mean, my introduction to computing was in 1967, and the computer we used had 14 memories. Can you believe that? And then I taught coding for quite a few years. But the whole idea of artificial intelligence doesn't faze me one little bit. It belongs to a universe of its own that is totally created by mankind. There's another universe as well that was created by God, and it involves human beings. And in Genesis chapter 7, it says, "The Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living," and if you read some translations, it's soul, and in other ones it says a living being. Now, we don't have any other... Look, what we think of as a being or a soul. Now, the word being has also been captured by people who are animal lovers, and they say that animals are sentient beings. They remember things and they do things like that. Now, that actually twists the meaning of the word being. The word soul also gets twisted, and intelligence gets twisted, and artificial intelligence gets twisted. And so we, human beings, tend to reinterpret words to suit certain other purposes. Now, what does it mean to be? I mean, some of you all know some philosophers who spend their whole lives, or have spent their whole lives working with that one. But when Moses was given the Ten Commandments, and he wasn't too sure whether the Israelites would accept what he said, "So who will I say I've been talking to?" And Jesus said, tell them, I am. Or tell them, being has been speaking to you. So in other words, there is another whole universe that's not actually the world we live in, the physical universe we live in, but it did communicate with that physical world. Now, we have terms in terms of the Bible, in terms of God, and God created, and God spoke, and God revealed. God doesn't reveal anything that we know of to computers. It's just not the sort of thing that he's interested in revealing to. So all of our computing is based on data that we collect, we massage it, we do all sorts of fascinating things with it. I mean, magnificent things with it. And the world that I live in, they talk about learning analytics. Now, I'll just tell you briefly what that's about. It's a kind of AI. And students who are studying, say online, they get all of their body movements registered, including their eye movements and whether they're paused for sort of 30th of a second here and 2/3 of a second there and all this sort of stuff. All of that goes into a huge data bank. And then they say, this student is, because patterns have been developed from other students, and it says this student is puzzled over something, therefore there has to be some action that reduces the puzzlement. And so it's like putting, well, here's a carpet square that's bright red, step on the carpet square that's bright red, so it steps on there, and so it's got the next moves made easy, and then the next one's made easy, and so on. So the student can actually path their way through this learning exercise, and it's called learning analytics, and it's supposed to be very, very good. Except that it doesn't parse what human beings mean by learning. I've got a granddaughter, and she was studying medicine, and she said to me, she was doing a first degree in medical science, it was called. And I said to her, so, well, how are you going, honey? And she said, I'm having this really difficult trouble with this part of microbiology which I really can't understand. I've been puzzling about it. And I said to her, that's the best thing that can happen to you. She said, I just can't work it out. I said, that is great, because when you do sort it out, you will never forget it. And that's true of what? We struggle with things. So the whole idea of this, the whole idea of learning analytics can't take struggle into account, and yet it is very, very important in terms of learning and retention of learning. The other thing is that the database on which my body movements are basically interpreted to make the next move for me optimal is based on a whole lot of other students, and I may be the singular student that doesn't meet those patterns. So there's a whole lot of things like that, which are technical things, but it's not intelligence in the same way as we have it. You know, there's a philosopher, I think he died in the 1900s. His name was C.S. Peirce, P-E-I-R-C-E, not I-E-R. And he said, one of the things that humans are pretty good at is actually imagining a possible hypothesis that no one's ever thought of before. Now, I've thought about that, and he's got a word for it. But at one stage, I had shares in a company that was looking at buying an X-tin mine near Bathurst. And they didn't know whether there was enough tin traces in the tailings in order to extract tin and make money out of it, all right? So, and as I was looking at this, and I thought, that's really interesting, and how are they sampling the tailings for the tin? And that actually connected with something I was looking at in my own educational research. Now, that was a connection between a problem in mining and education that I happened to twig because I happened to have my mind working on both at the same time. Now, there's an infinite number of connections that could be made, and people make those connections because they see some similarities or some contradictions between this, that, and the other thing. Now, we have thinking, we have reasoning, and so on, and AI is simulated reasoning. It's simulated because someone has created algorithms which mirror human thinking to some extent and elaborate on it and elaborate on it and elaborate on it. Now, there were plenty of problems that I couldn't work out when my coding was wrong, when I was working on some research I was doing. And so I would put in the number that said, I put a line that said 1 divided by 0. Now, that sends the computer into a bit of a loop for a bit, and then it says, oh, this is a dumb question, as it stops. But then I could get a feed of the sort of the 200 steps immediately leading up to that, and I could debug it that way. Now, that's something that I was taught to do in order for debugging it. But the computer itself didn't think of doing that. Didn't have a way of doing that. What is my sense of identity? Who am I? Artificial intelligence doesn't tell that. It doesn't say anything about my mood. It doesn't say anything about my sense of belonging. All of these things are human characteristics which can't be mirrored. Now, they can be simulated, and some of the simulations are so good, they have a kind of sense of reality to it. You think there's a person behind it. I'll give you an example. I was going up the North Coast recently, and this is to illustrate the fact that if something appears to be human, we are tempted to attribute humanness to it, right? So I was going along with a GPS, with my GPS on, and it says, after 600 metres, turn right. And what I did expect to hear after that was, you dumb blob. I said 600 metres, you turned right after 400 metres. Now you're going to have to go another 10 k's up the Bruce Highway, take the left exit, and I have to program you all the way back to where you're trying to go. But I hear nothing. And then it says, take the left exit. It doesn't get mad at me. It's got no sense of that at all. But I sort of expect sometimes that Jonah Lumley's voice will be going crooked at me because I didn't do what she said. But it's got nothing to do with that. It's about the programming of it. Now, we are not programmed like that. God we have a moral choice, and that's something that God invested in the first human beings from day one. And he said, you have choice. Now, the big choice was not so much eating fruit, but the big choice was accepting the authority of the Maker. They didn't believe God's word because another voice told them it wasn't reliable. And so they surrendered authority from God to this other person, which is Satan. Now, that's the sort of thing which is like we call morality. And that is so pervasive of a human being that it is not, you can mimic it with big calculations, but it isn't the same thing. We are different. Do we have a soul? I think that's a funny question because I actually don't know how to describe what a soul is or what a spirit. But what the Bible says is we commune with God, spirit to spirit. His spirit communes with our spirit, that we are children of God. It's a different universe from the AI universe, right? And I think as long as we realise that this isn't going to overtake us, it's not going to overtake our thinking, it's not going to overtake anything because the universe is different. And it's not Zuckerberg's metaverse. He didn't invent the term anyway. The Lord commanded the man, you are free to eat and so on. There is choice. We have a power to decide. There's Y forks in the road, and there's no ambiguity about the original command. It was an authoritative voice, and the person went the wrong way. Now, there's a big gulf between people once they've made... We inherited the wrong track. We went in the direction of Adam and Eve. Went in the wrong side of the Y direction. And only God can call us back. So what I want to just basically say is that the universe of AI is a different universe. It's not rubbish, but it's not always right. It's got faults and so on, but it's totally dependent on human input and human creation. It is totally a human creation. and it has no moral values whatsoever. Okay? Thanks.
Thanks, Royce. Yeah, I think that's really insightful. I think it's a really good distinction to make that, yeah, we're not, as much as it feels like when you interact with ChatGPT or whatever, that it's like another human in having our same problems or having our same emotions. It's not. It's emulating that. But there are things that are fundamental to us as human beings, like that we were made in the image of God, that any number of silicon chips aren't going to have, because that's what makes us human, made in the image of God, and have that being into us, like Royce said. So, yeah, I think that's really important. Again, maybe do you have a soul, or do you have? I think this is a good question to ask, and maybe I can rephrase it a little bit as like, what do you think about your being? Or like Royce was saying, or, the universe we live in, the connection that we have with the Creator, is that a thing? These are some things I just encourage you to think about. So just a little challenge, and then we'll go into question time. If you don't believe what the Bible says, because that's where we're getting, our understanding of our soul, or the living being, and the universe we're in a sort of abstract sense. It comes from the Bible. That's where this worldview that we believe comes from. If you don't believe that, I encourage you to put it to the test, because it's not just like abstract thinking and thoughts that have developed this worldview that we think about. It's just based on historical evidence and events that's happened in history and just nature around us and what we observe. So start looking at the historical evidence of Jesus' trial, death, burial, and resurrection. And for me, this evidence is undeniable. There's so much clear evidence of who Jesus was and the things that he did that points to the fact that we don't just belong to a predetermined switches in our brain and biological makeup or biological soup that we just dance to our DNA and things like that. It's more than that there's actually a connection with God, and there's evidence and logical reasoning behind that. So I really encourage you to think about that critically. Put it to the test. See if you think this is true. I definitely do. And then another little challenge, read what the Bible says about the soul. So, or living being, or, what Royce was saying. So Genesis, great place to look at this. And just all through the Bible, it talks about, there are things that, Jesus said about that apply to us as human beings, that, don't be afraid of, man who can kill your body, but can't kill your soul. There's something important about that. It's like, there's a distinction here, and there's something more to us than just our body, because God's saying that, what's not just your body, people can't take away. That's God who's got, the authority over that. So, there's some good things to read. So have a think about that, but we'll get into question time now. So if you've got any questions about anything from today, feel free to ask. And what I might do, I'll have a microphone here so I can hear with Royce if you've got questions for him too. Doug, would you be able to go around? Okay, so, hands up if you've got a question, and we'll try and answer you.
Is this on? Yep.
Will ChatGPT provide evidence for why it's saying what it does? Will it give references and?
Excellent question. I tested this. This is what's concerning. Let's say, one example I did for my, so there's like some businesses that I work with, and I said, okay, because its knowledge is based on the internet from 2021 back. So I said, okay, tell me what the main competitors of a company that does this and this and this. And it goes, here's your top 5 competitors. First 3 spot on. I thought, yeah, I know those competitors well. The next 2 had fantastic business names, had a little bio telling them what they did. And I got worried. I thought, I don't know these companies. I should know my competitors better. I Googled them. The AI made up these names. And the bios, and they sounded brilliant. Like if I was starting a new business in this area, I'd probably use the name that it suggested and take the approach it had in its bio. So it actually came up with them. And another thing I think this is what could be concerning, is if you say provide references as well, it might write you an essay, put references in, and let's say it's an essay to do with geometry or something that's mathematical or physics-based. What it might do is it might give you, in brackets, a German last name with a German university in the sources. And because we believe, the way people have trained it wants to give you answers that are believable. So you might look up that German name in that university and find that there's no one who exists with that name. But if you don't have if you're too lazy to look up that actual source, when you look at it, you go, oh, good, it's giving me a source. Now Bing has just bought ChatGPT, the OpenAI thing, for about $49 billion, I think, for 49% of the company. Or $10 billion for 49% of the company. Huge amount. They've been working on integrating it into their search engine thing, and they've got like a separate thing where you can ask it questions like ChatGPT. And they are working on, and I think it's using the same human reinforcement system, of actually getting it to link to actual sources. So it's a problem they're working on. But the thing with AI is you can always get systems to like 99.99% accurate, but you're always going to get little errors. So I don't think they're ever going to get past the problem of every now and then it making up a source. That's something. Does that sort of answer the question? Yep, excellent. Any other questions?
One of the things that I heard was that the most likely use of ChatGPT is an almost infinite supply of misinformation to support some actors' political ends or other thing, that you would not be able to, it could flood the internet with a viewpoint that someone wants to put there. Are we seeing any signs of that, and is that a real risk?
Yeah, so one thing I've seen in true entrepreneurial fashion, a lot of people are going, right, how can I make money out of this? And I see a lot of YouTube videos because I'm often trying to search for the technical videos to understand it better, from AI researchers. But there's all these YouTube videos that keep popping up. People are like, how to make $100 million from ChatGPT overnight, and all that sort of stuff. So there's, I think when people start to realise that they can actually make a lot of money, or they can, I don't think they're going to make a huge amount of money out of it, but there's all these opportunities they can use it for their agenda and things like that, and get it to do things much quicker than what they could, that the internet is just going to get a bit, packed full of things that aren't necessarily true. So, I think that'll be a case. But one thing I heard, which was really good, is a guy called Brett Weinstein. He's sort of he's a scientist. He's actually an evolutionary biologist. I don't necessarily agree with all of his research, but he does think very scientifically and about a lot of things, which I do learn a lot from. And he was talking about how one of the biggest problems he finds with already in academia is how to tell the real experts from the fake experts. Because there's a lot of people who can get through exams, even before AI, like ChatGPT, and fake it and fake it and fake it, and then all of a sudden they're a professor. And no one questions their authority because they're like, well, they're a professor, of course they know what they're doing. And they can say stuff and we all believe it. Now we've got ChatGPT where it's going to be harder to assess whether it's someone's actual work and actual thinking, their own critical thinking or not. So the ability to determine whether someone's an expert or they're a faker is going to be harder. And that's what he says is going to be one of the things that frustrates him the most about how AI has progressed so quickly, is because he's saying we're not ready for it. Like the world's not ready for more fake experts. So that's going to be a problem, yeah. Any other questions? No? Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for coming. It's great to hear your opinions about things and have discussions. And I encourage you to keep chatting about these things. And again, just the last message, I guess, don't worry too much about it. I mean, you can watch videos online, and when I first saw it, I was worried. But it's, life will move on, and we'll find ways to deal with it. And yeah, there's plenty of good uses for it too. So don't think it's just purely evil or anything. It's just a machine. So thanks for coming, hope you enjoy the rest of your day.